I know this sounds really weird and people often think I'm really odd and maybe a bit crazy, but I'm thankful that I got bipolar, not because bipolar is good. Bipolar is horrendous. It's awful. It's an illness that is really destructive and scary. But through it, God has worked good. So through this really difficult illness, He has grown me in humility and dependence on Him. And I really appreciate that. I really am glad that God bothered to work in me like that, if that makes sense.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to go from being very unwell with bipolar 1 to now living with a stable, well-managed life? And how faith, community, and the support of others can play a role in that journey? Welcome to Bipolar Talk, the podcast where we turn bipolarity into an opportunity. I'm Clément, founder of Upstage and Bipolar Type 2. Today, I'm joined by Lily Strachan, university chaplain at Robert Menzies College. Lily lived with bipolar type 1 herself, and she's passionate about relationship between faith and mental health, as well as the importance of how others can support someone on their journey. Lily, can you present yourself?
Thanks, Clément. Yeah, my name's Lily. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I grew up in Sydney. When I left school, I did an economics and law degree at Sydney University. And after that, I worked as a corporate lawyer in a big firm. And around that time, I got diagnosed with bipolar 1. So I'd been diagnosed with depression initially, and then a few years later, bipolar 1. I retrained as a minister. And so I did a theological degree, and I'm now a chaplain or a minister at, as you said, Robert Menzies College at Macquarie University. I am writing a book on bipolar and my experience, but also the theology of mental illness and suffering, and how can we understand the idea that there's a good, powerful God when you are going through such hard times. How do you make sense of faith and suffering together? So my book deals with that kind of thing. Yeah, that's me.
So one thing I really want to understand a bit more, because what is doing a chaplain? Because I guess it's
Yeah,
different.
it's a great question. So I'm ordained in the Anglican Church in Sydney, Australia as a minister. So I'm ordained to preach the Bible, teach the Bible, pray with people, do pastoral care. The word chaplain just means that you're a minister, but you're not a minister in a church. So I don't work in a church like lots of ministers do. A chaplain is basically a minister who works in the community. So it might be a chaplain in a school or a hospital or a prison, and I'm a chaplain in a university context. So I'm not working in a church, but I'm working in a Christian college where most of our students are not Christian. They're not Christian people. They might be people who are other religion, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist. They might be atheist, agnostic. They might just not be interested. But they can come to me if they want to talk about purpose and meaning and faith and life. And I have a lot of students who might be Christian who come and talk to me about those things, to read the Bible. And I have people of different faiths and no faiths who also come to me because they're interested. Lots of young people are really interested in purpose and meaning. And is there a God? And what does it all mean? So as a chaplain, I get the great privilege of chatting with young people about those big questions.
Yeah, and those questions are really key, because at the end of the day, I believe as bipolar, it's really about what does it mean and what is your purpose, and really knowing that, at least for me on a day-to-day basis, it's I want to help bipolar people. And most of the thing I do, and for example, when I refuse to drink alcohol or when I go to bed early, I really need this type of purpose to it helps me make the right decision. I don't know what would you say about you. I'm curious to know a bit about your journey, actually.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, just going back a little bit, I grew up in a family that wasn't religious, it wasn't Christian, but I was encouraged by my parents to think for myself and investigate and make my own decisions. And so, as a young person, as a teenager, I did that. I investigated different faiths and religions, but I was really interested by the person of Jesus, the sort of the leader, the God of the Christian faith. he sounded really intriguing to me. I was really interested in him. He treated people really well. When you look at the accounts of his life and his death in the Bible, he particularly treated women well. He treated people who were vulnerable. I think he treated people with mental illness really well. And so I was intrigued by him as a person. And I thought I had to do something to become a Christian. I wanted to become a Christian, but I thought I have to do something. I have to be a good person. I have to say the right prayers. I have to go to church. And nothing was happening. And actually, it wasn't until I read the Bible for myself that I realized that I don't have to do anything to be a Christian. No one has to do anything. They just have to trust that Jesus has done the work for you. So Jesus was perfect. He was good for us. So if we trust in him, his perfection becomes our salvation. So that's a very quick summary of the Christian gospel. But I guess once I trusted in Jesus, once I became a Christian person, I just wanted to learn more. And so I did. So I went to church to learn more about this faith that I just committed myself to. And I sort of kept learning, and I really wanted to do well in school and in academics, and I did that. And I went to do, as I said, economics and law at Sydney University, and I really strived hard to do well at that. And I think that's great to do well academically. But then I got a job as a corporate lawyer, and that was great as well. That was really prestigious. It was a really top tier firm. I was doing great work, but I was also wrestling with depression. That I'd first gotten depression when I'd had a really horrible breakup, and it was really traumatic and difficult. And I got depressed for the first time in my life at about the age of 22. And so through law school, through working as a corporate lawyer, I was wrestling with this depression, which, as you know, is awful, such a horrible feeling, not having that hope or joy. And then in 2008, a few years later, I had my first psychotic episode. So I had a psychosis, a break with reality. I was paranoid, I was delusional, and I ended up in hospital in the emergency department here in Sydney. And I was scheduled against my will. So it was an involuntary admission, which is really scary for me, for my family, for my parents who were there. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have a diagnosis. They were trying to work out what was going on. Was I just really stressed because I'd been working on a big corporate deal at the time? And I was diagnosed with bipolar 1. And I, like you talk about a little bit, so often it's really important to accept that diagnosis and process it. I didn't accept it for a number of months, possibly a year, until I realized actually maybe this is what I do have. But the stigma was huge. Working in a law firm, I hope it's a bit better now, but you really have to be perfect in a really top tier firm. You have to work really hard, long hours, and none of that was very conducive to having this disease, this illness of bipolar 1. And I kept working as a lawyer, and I did that. But more and more, I started to think, look, is this what I really want to do? I never particularly wanted to be a lawyer. I just had a law degree, so I thought I'd give it a go. And more, I kept thinking about how much I loved talking to people about Jesus and what he's done for us. I loved reading the Bible with some young people at church. That was one of my favorite times in the week. And I just started thinking, what if I could do that as a job? What if I could tell people about the gospel of Jesus and life in him, life to the full in him, as an actual job? Of course, it wasn't that easy. You can imagine, it's really hard to quit a job that's paying you a lot of money, giving you a lot of prestige, and where you have a secretary and a harbour view. That was really hard to walk away from. But ultimately, I was pretty convinced that this would be a better fit for me, and also that God wanted me to do it. I was pretty convinced, God didn't speak to me in an auditory way, but the more I thought about it, I thought this is what my gifts and passions are aligned to, is actually sitting with young people and sharing faith and purpose and meaning with them. So this is a very long-winded way of saying, I think, getting good sleep, and if drinking alcohol is unhelpful for you, that's a great thing to avoid. But I guess the Christian faith isn't about rules like that. It's about a relationship with the person of Jesus and letting your life be transformed. So I guess for me, something that God has really transformed my life through the faith that I've grown in over the years is to actually be more humble and more dependent on Him, whether it's in prayer or in my faith, because having bipolar has taught me that I can't do it all. I'm not perfect. So before I got ill, I think I was pretty selfish. I was pretty, I think, quite proud, like arrogant actually, because I'd done well in school and uni and in work. But this illness really uh, meant I plummeted to a point of complete dependence on doctors and nurses and medication. And that really taught me that I need to depend on God more. I need to be more humble. I need to accept that I need help. Most of all, I need that help from God, but I also need it from the medication I take and the doctors that God gives me. So I think that's been I know this sounds really weird, and people often think I'm really odd and maybe a bit crazy. But I'm thankful that I got bipolar, not because bipolar is good. Bipolar is horrendous. It's awful. It's an illness that is really destructive and scary. So bipolar is not good. Don't hear me saying that illness is good. But through it, God has worked good. So through this really difficult illness, He has grown me in humility and dependence on Him. And I really appreciate that. I really am glad that God bothered to work in me like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Is like, and I feel it's really important if you're listening and if you're also bipolar, is not to see it as a curse or something bad. It's like
Mm,
we are what we are different. And of course, it's difficult, but it shouldn't be something we're ashamed of it because we haven't choose it.
mm,
And if we are actually, I guess, doing the right things, then it can make us make maybe better decision and make us more happy and have a better life.
mm,
And I've
mm.
seen that a lot because I think the same as you, Lily. It makes us more humble. It makes us understand that we need help. We need to communicate to other people. And I think like if it's used in the right way, it can make us a great person. So,
Yeah, yep, definitely. And
sorry.
no, sorry, I interrupted. To young people, so mostly 18 to 24-year-olds. As you know, the amount of mental illness in that age group is pretty huge. And so I have a lot of students come to me who are struggling with depression, bipolar, anxiety, schizophrenia. And I think having been through mental illness myself, I'm much better equipped to help them. I can I can get alongside them in a way that I don't think I would have been able to had I not had this illness and learned how to manage it. I'm so thankful that I've had such great doctors and networks who are doing what you're doing at Hope Stage, where you're helping people to live with bipolar in a way that is an opportunity to grow and to give back and to serve others. And I really agree with that.
Yeah, wanted to go back a little bit into work with bipolar because I think it's an important topic, and I feel like some type of job are really tough when you have bipolar. Thinking about, for example, working at night, not having like hours that are kind of consistent. And so, do you think it's one also of the reason you wanted to change career, or what would you say, Lily?
Yeah, it was. I was quite happy as a lawyer. I didn't hate it. I thought it was quite interesting. I worked with really great people. In particular, I really liked the camaraderie of working with colleagues and working on a big deal. I worked with really big corporate clients because we were a top tier firm. The big clients would come to us. So that was really interesting being able to work on those kind of deals. But the hours were pretty long and stressful. Not always, but if we were working on a deal, there'd be weeks when you work till 3 a.m. in the office and you'd be expected to be back in the office at 9 a.m. And I think I was younger then, obviously, so I think it was easier to do, but it was quite a dangerous pace. And I think because we all worked that hard, we worked at that pace, you didn't realize it wasn't normal or healthy, I think. Like I say, I hope there's some better environment now, but I fear that Yeah, big corporate firms, whether it's law, accounting, investment banking, can have those long hours, which can be really damaging for people with particularly bipolar. I mean, my first psychotic breakdown was after a really big corporate deal. So I was working with a team on the BHP Billiton Rio Tinto merger, proposed merger, which was huge at the time. It was the biggest corporate deal at the time. And I was working in Melbourne, so I'm based in Sydney, but I got put up in a hotel in Melbourne. And so I was away from all my networks. I was away from church. I was away from my family and friends. And so I was not sleeping I was working long hours, but I would get home at maybe 10 p.m., but not sleep all night and then be back in the office in the morning. And because I didn't know I had bipolar, I just thought I wasn't sleeping, and I thought, well, that's not great. But look, people don't sleep all the time. Lots of people don't sleep. That's pretty normal. So I didn't know that anything was wrong until it became really wrong and I got paranoid and psychotic. And I was staying, in the end, I reached out to a family member who lives in Melbourne, and she flew with me back to Sydney to hand me over to my dad at Sydney Airport. She was so worried about me that she bought 2 tickets, flew us back. And then my dad took me. I said, look, I just need a sleeping tablet. That's all. I just need a sleeping tablet. So he took me to my GP. She said, no, you're not well. You need to go to emergency. And that's when I was admitted under the Mental Health Care Act. And so I do think that it's not like it was my firm's fault that I got sick, but the circumstances and the working environment certainly contributed to it. Even just when you're working on these big deals, they're top secret. I wasn't allowed to let anyone know what I was working on, which was understandable. But that paranoia that's built into the job isn't good for a bipolar mind. To answer your question, after I was admitted for my first psychotic episode and I got my diagnosis, I was told to stay off work for at least 2-3 months. I went back to work after a week because I was determined to hide this illness. It was so stigmatized that I was determined not to admit to anyone that I'd been in hospital or that I'd been sick. And of course, what goes up must come down, of course, in bipolar. So I got incredibly depressed after that. And it was the depression that really made it hard to work. As you know, as lots of listeners know, you might be good at your job, but when you are depressed, you are not able to do really very much at all. And so then I had to take time off. And yeah, that got me thinking about what I'd rather do. But it wasn't that I really disliked my job. But as you say, it wasn't. Those sort of jobs, I'm sure some people can manage it. I don't think it would have been good for me, but I really appreciate that it wasn't that I was trying to get rid of or escape that law job. I genuinely wanted to do ministry. So there was a positive reason about the change. It wasn't just that, oh, I'm miserable here, this isn't working for me, I'm going to shift. In God's kindness, I more and more was thinking, Ash, I'd really love to do this as a job, to talk to people about the gospel. So there was the
Yeah.
negative and the positive. Yeah.
I think it's something I really want to talk about, and thank you for sharing, is like working with bipolarity. And I feel it's a topic that is non-well understood, and there's also stigma about it. Because if you are in our situation, which is having a good job and being happy, but living with bipolar, is really about putting ourselves rules. And personally, is about, for example, working late. I'm really strict with myself. It happened that I do it, but I really put myself a limit because I know that my sleep is the most important. And so
important.
Yeah, and work cannot be more important than sleep. And then one thing I want to talk about also is about talking about your bipolarity at work. So it can be difficult, and it's really a personal decision. What I would say, if you are in this sort and question, is maybe first think about, like, is it like, are you doing the work? Because if you are doing the work, then you probably have a good relationship with your manager. People probably know that, yeah, and then it's much easier to talk about it. And I usually rather talk about and propose people to talk about their bipolarity when they are like doing good, and really ask the person if he knows about bipolar. You one-on-one meeting with your manager, ask if he knows, explain what it is, and explain why you want to talk about the fact that you have bipolar. It's really about letting him know that you trust him, that you basically want to work better and have and do better for the firm or for the NGO or whatever. And because you're talking about it, it will actually make you a better worker. And I think it's really important to say it in this way and explain that it's not a disability in a way that you're not going to be productive. It's just it's a way to, for example, explain like if you don't sleep well for let's say a day or two or even more, then it's much easier to go and see your boss and say, hey, I need 2 days off. I need a 4-day weekend because I need to reset my sleep. So that's the type of thing I wanted you to hear. And I want to know, Lily, about like, did you talk about your bipolar at work and how did it go?
Quick break. Can you let us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform of your choice? It really helps us break the stigma around bipolarity. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's been a long time. That first psychotic episode was 2008, so a really long time ago. And I was quite scared to share my bipolar at work, but I was scared to share my bipolar diagnosis with anyone. I didn't tell friends. My parents knew, very, very close friends knew. I didn't tell my minister at church. So I certainly wasn't going to tell work. Unless I absolutely had to. And it did get to the point where I had to because I had to take time off work. But I was quite scared. And I think looking back, I would have urged myself, if I could tell myself back then, as you say, that this is a valid diagnosis and reality to talk to your boss about. And I think should have given them the benefit of the doubt that they would have dealt with that well and responded well and supported me. I guess I can speak more about the contrast with my current job where I'm very open about it, and the students really appreciate that. So, for example, I'm responsible for looking after our student leaders who are sort of older students who help look after people in their blocks in the college and do events and promote community. And at the beginning of the year, we have some days away where we train up our student leaders. And in that time, I always say to them, I have bipolar and I'm really well managed. And the reason I'm well managed is I make sure I get sleep. I make sure I take my medication. I get exercise. I spend time with friends. I spend time with God. I spend time in nature. And I say to them, I've set it up with my work, with my boss, that I'm not on call between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. So I live at college. I have an apartment here. I live where I work. But I say to my student leaders between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., you can contact these other people, but I need to sleep to stay well so that I can care for you in turn, so that I can do my job as a chaplain, as someone who supports students and does pastoral care. I need those hours not to be disturbed. And that's been a game changer. That's been really brilliant. And it also helps the student leaders to see that I'm vulnerable, I'm being vulnerable with them, and I'm being real about my own limitations. Like you say, bipolar isn't this horrendous tragedy. As you say, I think it's an opportunity. I've seen myself grow and change, and I love that. And so I can show them that having a mental illness is not something to be ashamed of or scared of. It's something that we can share with one another and share our vulnerabilities. And they actually feel more comfortable then to share their limitations and vulnerabilities with me. And I have a boss who's incredibly supportive. And like you say, sometimes, as you imagine with young people, we have crisis situations where they need a lot of help. We have students who have lots of high needs, and just the day-to-day rigor of doing a job where you're interacting with people all the time. And sometimes I get to the point where I have to say to my boss, yeah, I need a 3 or a 4-day weekend to recover. And he's always so supportive of that. He knows I work hard. He knows I love the students, and he knows that I know what I need to stay well.
Yeah, and I think you're really doing good because it's really mature. And if you're listening, it's exactly this beautiful story about knowing yourself, knowing your limit, putting the limit so you can actually achieve what you want and avoid relapse. And we can work as bipolar because I heard some people say that, oh, we cannot work, we are sick. I don't agree with that. I guess some people won't be able to work the same number of hours. That's for sure. Sometimes you cannot work in certain environment, of course, because it's too stressful or the hours are at night. But we can do work, we can create value. And for me, it's also part of my stability, I would say, because it really gave me a rhythm, really gave me a purpose. And that's really important for me. And one thing you say that I really love is like, you say, I can't do it all. And I feel it's something probably most of us should say a little bit more. It's like we have limitation and we have to use it, even be more careful about it, I guess, as bipolar. What would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's it. A lot of it's wisdom, isn't it? There's not hard and fast rules. It's not like you can't be a lawyer or you can't be a minister or you can't host a podcast. We're all different and we're complex creatures. We've got lots going on. We have our biology, our genetics, our chemistry, the impact of medication, but we're also relational and spiritual and emotional. And so we want to take account for our whole person, the complexity that no two people with bipolar are the same. And we all have different capacities. So, for example, I live with chronic pain. I have pain in my shoulder and neck pretty much constantly. Now, that's not to do with bipolar, it's just other stuff going on. But I have to take account for that. And it means that some of my colleagues in my position in other jobs, they can meet with 7 students a day, 7 hours, 7 meetings with intense emotional conversations with students. I just can't. I've tried it. I can't. And that's okay. I can still do my job well, meeting with fewer students over a longer period of time, breaking it up with breaks where I might go out for a little walk or a stretch. So it's not just mental health or bipolar. You might have chronic pain. You might have caring responsibilities for a child or a parent. You might have other things that you have to manage and live with. And we're all different. So we have to respect our unique complexity. And I think that's really key to staying well and being well managed, whatever you're dealing with, is taking the time to know yourself in all your complexity, to know what your gifts and passions are, to know how you're wired, to know your limitations, and to do that in consultation with friends and family, but also with a good psychologist, a good doctor, a good psychiatrist, because it is it's a challenge to know yourself as an adult. And so I'd always encourage people to see a psychologist, just to have someone that you can throw ideas around about, when I do this, this happens, or I sometimes find myself thinking about this and that distresses me. What do you think? And as you build up that understanding of who you are, you can better manage what you're capable of, I think, in the workplace and in life as well.
Yeah, and as you say, everyone is different. And I'm bipolar type 2 Clément, and you're bipolar type 1 Lily, and we don't have the same problem. We don't have the same phase, and we don't need the same treatment. We don't need the same rhythm. And that's what you have to figure out for yourself if you're listening. Like, what do I need? What life do I want to build? What can I do? What I cannot do? And that's actually building your own system. And having a psychologist, of course, is really important. And that's what we try to help you do, actually, with Upstage. Is really like, do I need a psychologist? Do I need a psychiatrist? Do I need a peer helper? How can I manage those? What do I do when I see triggers? How can I manage my sleep? How do I manage my stress? It's all those different questions. To go back a bit on the subject, that I found really interesting is like faith and bipolar. And one of the thing I was wondering, so I have a really good friend who actually wrote a book about bipolar and faith in France. And
Mm,
basically, we talk about it, and we were wondering if some of the saints, some of really important people actually had or not bipolar, for example.
mm,
Because there's one way is because when you're having those vision about God, could it be also part of having like being different, having bipolar,
mm,
for
mm,
example, or it could be schizophrenia. And I
mm,
was wondering what is your thought about this subject? Because there's a
mm.
part of me which I feel it will maybe make people accept it a bit more and put less stigma.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. My tradition is Protestant, not Catholic, so I don't know as much about the Catholic saints, although I know a little bit, and I know a lot of the time the Catholic saints have witnessed, or you need to have done a miracle. You have to have a certified miracle to be a saint, right? In the Protestant tradition, we believe that all Christians are saints. We're saints because we're in Jesus, and we don't have to be special. We don't have to do a miracle. We're holy people, the Bible says, which doesn't mean we're always perfect or good. It just means we are connected to Jesus. And so we have his holiness is imputed to us. But certainly through church history, there are great men and women of God who love God, who have great faith, who wrote, who preached, who had also suffered with a lot of mental illness, particularly depression. John Newton, the famous hymn writer who wrote Amazing Grace, had deep, deep depression, really struggled, suicidal for most of his life. And his friend, William Cowper, who wrote beautiful hymns, said to him, "Look, you're headed for heaven. In heaven, there will be no more crying or mourning or pain or suffering. That's where you're headed." And I think as Christians, I have great hope in life now. I love my life. I live life to the full in Jesus. I love what I get to do as Lily, as a Christian, as a chaplain, and just as a person. But I know that heaven in the Christian tradition is going to be even better, infinitely better, because there will be no more death, because death comes to all of us, suffering comes to all of us in this life. But Jesus promises that he's going to come back and he's going to renew the earth and actually get rid of all the things that trouble us, all the things that are difficult. But in the meantime, in this life, as Christians, we are to wait with hope. Not because all our illnesses are going to be healed miraculously here and now. God hasn't promised that. He hasn't promised that he'll heal all our illnesses now. Or like the Catholic saints that will do miracles. He hasn't promised that. But what he has promised is life eternal with eternal hope and joy and peace and love, which is really exciting. I was going to say something else and I've forgotten. You might want to remind me of your question.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, but first of all, I think it's really important to consider that religion have a sense of community, and
Mm,
praying is, if you can say, is in a way a little bit close to meditation, to spirituality.
hmm
And there's been a lot of study who shows, for example, that someone who is religious, the chance of suicidal is way lower than people who are
mm.
atheists.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
I really, because personally I was raised Catholic. Right now it's like, to be honest, I'm more like, I don't really know. I consider myself, I guess, agnostic, but I still believe a little bit in some stuff. It's like, yeah.
You're working.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's really important to be like, the most is about what helps you, and it's about what gives you hope. I'm I think religion could be a great help. And also, I guess a lot of people who have, at the end of the day, have, yeah, I would say, have help. And
Yeah.
whatever type of help you can have, and And that's the beauty of about praying is like you can get help anytime, anywhere, and to not feel alone. So, but to go back a little bit, like, so how do you think religion help you with your bipolarity?
I really appreciate that question because it's helped so much, honestly. I wouldn't be alive without what God has done for me and is doing in me and has protected me over the years. I mean, firstly, I believe God gives us all good things. So I believe God's given me my doctors, He's given me medication. I'm so thankful that He's given me friends and family. He's given me, prayer where I get to talk to Him anytime I like. And sometimes when I've been depressed, I can't even pray. I have no hope, right? I don't have hope that God's going to listen or answer. And I love that even in those moments of great doubt and despair, God doesn't give up on me. I sometimes do this with my students, right? If you can see my arms, you grab both wrists. And if you let go, God's still holding on to you, even if you let go. And I really appreciate that. I never doubted that God existed through my illness and through really deep depression, but I doubted that He was good. I doubted that He was good to me because I thought a good, loving God wouldn't let me go through this pain. And so I had to really wrestle with that. And I'm really thankful because I kept wrestling. I asked my friends to pray for me when I couldn't pray for me. I couldn't read the Bible, so I asked other people to read it to me. And it was really through, as you say, that community who held me up, who lifted up my hands in prayer when I couldn't lift up my hands in prayer. And they were great because they didn't put any burden on me. They didn't say, Lily, if you're a proper Christian, you need to pray and read the Bible and go to church. They knew all those things were really difficult for me. I was struggling just to live every day and get through each moment. And they were so kind and thoughtful, most of them anyway, in just not laying those burdens on me. You know, Jesus says something beautiful that I love in the Gospel of Matthew. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And the thing that God has offered me over the years is deep soul rest. Yes, meaning and purpose, but He actually has helped me so practically to get through the day. And that doesn't mean it's always been easy. It's been incredibly difficult. But I'm thankful that I can look back and see how He was with me even when I didn't feel it. And He was holding on to me even when I'd let go of Him. So it's really been amazing. I did want to say something about prayer and psychosis and mania and hypomania, because as you know, a symptom of mania, hypomania, psychosis is often spiritual ideation. So some people believe they're the Messiah or they're an angel or they're a demon or there are demons after them. I've believed that in the past in psychotic episodes. And so I would really counsel, if you are a Christian and a person who prays, when you're praying with someone who's really unwell, keep your prayers really grounded in reality. Don't pray about big meaning, what's going on, what's God doing, because that can actually confuse someone who's in that state. So you pray something like, God, thank you so much for Lily. Thank you that you love her. Please help her to get the help she needs. Help her to get sleep. Amen. You know, you keep it really grounded. That's something I'd say if you're someone who prays.
Yeah, thanks for the tips. And yeah, so it's like, it's really about, it's what do you want and how do you want to build a system that helps you. And for Lily, it has been also faith, and it's great. And everybody has to find these things, and it's really like there's no one way. And it's why it's difficult if you're listening, because it'd be
Totally.
too easy, you know, you can just, okay, I do this, I do that, and then it's done. No, sorry, it's not like that.
No. And I guess that's, whether it's a church community or another community, you really want to get people around you if you're unwell. And if you're well, my illness is very well managed, but I need to make sure I have time with friends. I'm not married. I live by myself with my very cute dog, but I need to make time with friends that really enrich me and support me. And so whether it's church, which I really benefit from, which is amazing, or another community. Don't do it alone. Life wasn't meant to be done in isolation from other people, and that's especially so when you are unwell.
Yeah, it's like isolation is probably one of the toughest thing, and in depression is what worse things up. But no, I think you're right. It's like finding your community, finding your system. Faith is really a great option, and the data actually prove it, which is interesting.
It is, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you one last question. Like, if you had the magic wand, Lily, what would you change in mental health?
So much. Hey, there's so much to be improved. Obviously, more access to doctors and psychologists that people, particularly with not much income, can afford. Yeah, increasing that access for all people is really important, and for medication as well. I think I'd come back to what I was saying about we are complex creatures. So, as a Christian, I believe God has made us amazingly. We are amazing. The human brain, we can barely understand. The greatest researchers and doctors in the world are still grappling, and our body is amazing. And as I said, we're made up of genetics and biology and chemistry, but we're also emotional, relational, and spiritual. So, just as someone who's on this podcast who is a person of faith, I'd really encourage people not to neglect their spiritual reality. You might not be religious, but everyone should be considering, I think, where they find hope and purpose and meaning in life, because you can't live without hope, actually. And that's what's so horrible about depression, is the absence of hope. It's what makes it so hard to get through the day. So you want to be someone who, yes, is making sure you're seeing your doctor, taking the medication you need, getting out in nature, exercising, but also think about, where is your purpose? Where is your hope? Where is your peace and meaning? And to give that some thought as well, because often as adults, I think we're like, well, I've got a mortgage and I've got a job and I've got this illness and I've got kids. I don't have time for purpose and meaning, but I think it's worthwhile investing that.
Yeah, so to recap a little bit what we talk about, so it's really about like building your journey as bipolar. So it's really having meaning, having purpose, and this is kind of your North Star, where you want to go. And to have that really help accepting to do the effort right now, because we all need to build our system to get through rehabilitation, because it's a difficult path, but we can do it. And all of us have a different type of bipolarity, have different needs. Faith could be a great help. Praying also, data actually prove it. It can also be other things. It can be spiritualities, meditation, but everyone can build his own. And we also find a way to talk about bipolar at work. So how you can do it. So really wait for the right time that you're considering to the company. And it's usually much better to do it when you're doing well, rather than wait when it goes worse. So you can actually prevent the episode instead of like having them. So I really want to thank you, Lily, for your time, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much, Clément. It's been wonderful.
To learn more about Bipolarity, go to our website, upstage.com, HOPESTAGE.com. See you soon.